How's it going, everyone? My name's IronStark, and today I wanted to go over the builds I'm taking into the Shadow of the Erdtree DLC. From Software has a reputation for the DLCs being among the most challenging, yet expertly crafted content they make, and because of that, I wanted to discuss and showcase how I prepared two different characters for the DLC in the span of a week. This video will go over why I chose these particular builds and weapons, the talismans that I used, ashes of war that I used on each weapon, the Physick Tears that I used, and how I spec'd my stats as I progressed from the middle of the game to the end, showcasing footage of boss fights to provide context on how well they perform from Morgott to Malenia. I also wanted to have a bit of an addendum to this video. This is not meant to be the best or most optimal way to prepare for the Shadow of the Erdtree DLC. This is just what I consider to be the most efficient way to start an NG and get ready for the DLC with limited time, which would be great for anyone who hasn't touched Elden Ring in months and is coming back for the DLC, or for someone who wants a fresh new game to experience the DLC, since all their other datas are in NG plus 7. Hi, it's me, I'm that person, all my datas are in NG plus 7. This is meant for that audience, although the things I mention here could be useful for anyone who's starting out playing Elden Ring, or someone who wants to learn how to get through Elden Ring quickly, since both of these datas were completed in less than 8 hours. I chose to go with two separate builds to enter the Shadow of the Erdtree DLC, one strength build and one dexterity build, as melee builds are among the most popular in the game to use. I went with two separate builds as strength and dexterity builds tend to have differing strengths and weaknesses, and I wanted to get a feel for how the DLC bosses play depending on different playstyles. I also started both datas on a fresh new game because, as I mentioned, From's DLCs tend to be no joke. For my strength build, I chose to use the Great Stars, a Great Hammer class weapon that can be obtained relatively early in a playthrough if you head straight for Altus Plateau as soon as possible and complete the first part of Vari's questline. It has very solid base damage, gets an A scaling in strength when set to heavy affinity, deals strike damage, deals a very high stance damage, has native bleed, and heals you each time you land an attack on an enemy. For my dexterity build, I chose to use the Uchigatana, a katana class weapon that is one of the most dependable and reliable weapons in the game. It can be a player's starting weapon if they choose the samurai class, making it a very convenient choice to carry a run. It is among one of the best katanas in the game, getting an A scaling in dexterity when set to keen, gets an access to an array of useful weapon skills, has a very responsive moveset, and has native bleed. For the Great Stars build, I chose to go with the hero starting class as it has the highest strength stat among the starting classes. With its 16 strength and 9 dexterity, it requires minimal stat investment to wield the Great Stars, only needing 6 levels in strength and 3 in dexterity to use it while one-handing or two-handing. For the Uchigatana build, I chose the samurai starting class for the obvious reason I stated before. There's no need to find the weapon in the open world because I start with it. Despite both builds playing very differently from one another, there's a fair amount of crossover in the talismans they utilize. Both builds make use of the Axe Talisman, which boosts the power of charged heavy attacks by 10%, as found in the Mistwood Ruins in Limgrave. The Green Turtle Talisman, which boosts stamina regeneration, and is found in the Summonwater Village in Limgrave. The Ritual Sword Talisman, which boosts attack power by 10% when at full health, and is found in the Loux Ruins. The Lord of Blood's Exaltation, which increases attack power by 20% for 20 seconds when bleed is procced nearby, is found in the Lanedale Catacombs and the Sewers. Shard of Alexander, which increases the power of weapon skills by 15%, and is obtained in Crumbling Farum Azula upon completing Alexander's questline. And lastly, the Rotten Wings Sword Insignia, a successive hit buff talisman, which is found in Erdtree upon completing Millicent's questline and siding with her. A talisman that I used exclusively with the Great Stars build was the Claw Talisman, which increases the power of jump attacks by 15%, and is found at the top of a tower in Stormvale Castle, near the Rampart Tower. The talisman I used exclusively on the Uchigatana build was the Winged Sword Insignia, a slightly weaker successive hit buff found in Stillwater Cave in Liurnia, which was mainly used as a substitution for the Rotten Wingsword Insignia from the early to mid-game, since Rotten Wingsword Insignia is only available after getting through most of Erdtree at the end of the game. A major factor as to why I chose 2 Smithing Stone weapons as opposed to somber Smithing Stone weapons was due to the versatility offered by being able to infuse whatever weapon skill I wanted onto my weapons to best suit any given combat scenario. An additional perk of the Ashes of War that I use in both builds is that they are all obtainable relatively early in a playthrough, are powerful, and FP efficient. The Great Stars build uses 4 Ashes of War, Wild Strikes, Cragblade, Lion's Claw, and Stormcaller. Wild Strikes can be obtained in Limgrave near Stormvale Castle. Cragblade can be found near the Impassable Bridge site of Grace in Caelid. Lion's Claw can be found at Fort Gale in Caelid by defeating a Lion Guardian. Lastly, Stormcaller can be found in Stormvale Castle, near the secluded cell site of Grace. The main purpose of these weapon skills is to deal crushing blows to overpower bosses with the raw power and stance damage of the Great Stars, with Cragblade buffing both, and Lion's Claw dealing large amounts of raw and stance damage in a single hit. Although Wild Strikes and Stormcaller are both good at landing successive hits and applying bleed buildup. The Uchigatana build utilizes 4 Ashes of War as well: Unsheath, Spinning Slash, Stormblade, and Double Slash. Unsheath can be found at Lake Agil in Limgrave near the giant crabs. Both Spinning Slash and Stormblade are sold at the War Master's Shack in Limgrave. Lastly, Double Slash is found in Celia, Town of Sorcery in Caelid. The purpose of these weapon skills largely revolves around dealing successive hits and bleed buildup with the Uchigatana, although the mechanics of each weapon skill is a bit eclectic. Unsheath deals high stance damage and can be comboed into ally attacks swiftly. Both Double Slash and Spinning Slash launch multi-hit combos that run smoothly into regular attacks as well, and Stormblade not only lands successive hits very quickly, but also has a double hitbox on the weapon and the projectile, and can act as a ranged option. There is some overlap in what Physick Tears the Great Stars and Uchigatana builds use, simply due to some Physick Tears being universally useful, although due to stat spread and slightly different tactics, there is some deviation. Both builds use the Spiked Cracked Tear, which increases charged heavy attacks by 15% for 3 minutes, and is found at the Minor Erdtree in Mistwood. The Green Burst Tear, which increases stamina regen for 3 minutes, is found by defeating the Putrid Avatar of the Minor Erdtree in Caelid, and the Thorny Cracked Tear, which offers the strongest successive hit buff in the game for 3 minutes, and is found by defeating the Putrid Avatar in the Consecrated Snowfield. Physick Tears that I exclusively used on the Great Stars build were the Strength Knot Crystal Tear, which increases strength by 10 points for 3 minutes, and is found on a cliff near the Stormhill Shack guarded by a troll, and the Stone Barbed Cracked Tear, which increases stance damage dealt by 30% for 30 seconds, and is found by defeating the Putrid Avatar at Dragonburrow. A Physick Tear that I used exclusively on the Uchigatana build was the Dexterity Knot Crystal Tear, which increases dexterity by 10 points for 3 minutes, and is found on a small patch of land in Liurnia, not far from the Boiled Prawn Shack. I did pick up the Purifying Cracked Tear with the Uchigatana build to nullify the effects of Mohg's use of Nihil, but we'll get to that fight later. Both builds make use of only 4 incantations, which are all buffs because they're both melee-centric builds. Bloodflame Blade is found at the Rose Church in Liurnia, and has a buff that applies 40 bleed over the course of 2 seconds with each hit, and works best with weapons with native bleed, which is fortunate for the Great Stars and the Uchigatana. Flame Grant Me Strength increases physical and fire damage by 20%, as well as increases stamina regen for 30 seconds, and is found on a perimeter wall at Fort Gale in Caelid. Golden Vow, which is found at the Corpse Stench Shack at Mount Gilmere, increases all damage sources by 15%, as well as increases all damage type negations by 10%, and lasts for 80 seconds. Lastly, Howl of Shabriri is found at the Frenzy Flaming Tower in Liurnia, and increases all damage types by 25%, but comes at a cost, with all damage taken being increased by 30% and lasting for 40 seconds. What should be noted about buff stacking is you can buff Golden Vow and Flame Grant Me Strength, or Golden Vow and Howl of Shabriri, but you cannot stack all three together, nor can you stack Flame Grant Me Strength with Howl of Shabriri. This is because Golden Vow is an aura buff, whereas Flame Grant Me Strength and Howl of Shabriri are body buffs. You can still stack successive hit buffs and physick buffs on top of these incantations though. With all the build specific things out of the way, it's time to talk about smithing stones. Feel free to skip ahead to the boss fights if you're not interested, but this will give you all insight as to how I was able to run through Elden Ring on a fresh save so quickly. In general, smithing stone weapons have a much harder upgrade path than somber weapons, as it takes 97 smithing stones to fully upgrade a smithing stone weapon, whereas it only takes 10 to upgrade a somber weapon. Fortunately, it's still pretty viable to have enough materials to fully upgrade your weapon without going too far off the beaten path. What I'm going to describe isn't about getting a fully upgraded weapon as quickly as possible. Rather, it's about upgrading a weapon as efficiently as possible with minimal effort and as little going out of your way as possible. A general rule of thumb that I like to follow is you should have a plus 15 or plus 16 weapon before Morgott, a plus 20 weapon before Fire Giant and the Godskin Duo, and for Maliketh and beyond you should have a fully upgraded weapon. For smithing stone 1s, I roam around key areas in Limgrave, such as the area in Stormhill surrounded by trolls, bridges leading towards the Summonwater village and Mistwoods, as well as purchasing from merchants if necessary. For smithing stone 2s, I tend to go to these gazebos in Liurnia, which are typically guarded by my favorite enemy in the game, the giant lobsters, and areas around the Academy Town, guarded by Rhea Lucarian soldiers and this giant crab here. To compensate for any smithing stone 1s or 2 that you may be missing, you can go to Rhea Lucaria Crystal Tunnel and defeat the Crystallian to pick up the smithing stone minor bell bearing 1 to make smithing stones 1 and 2 available for purchase at the Round Table Hold. Rhea Lucaria Crystal Tunnel is also worth visiting because it has a ton of smithing stone 3s. From there, smithing stone 4s can be found at the Ruinstrew Precipice, which is typically guarded by giant bats. The Ruinstrew Precipice also serves a dual purpose by granting you access to Altus Plateau if you can defeat Magma Worm Makar. For any missing smithing stone 3s or 4s, you can go to the sealed tunnel in Altus Plateau and pick up the second smithing stone bell bearing to make smithing stone 3s and 4s purchasable at the Round Table Hold. The sealed tunnel is also host to smithing stone 5s, as is the Altus Tunnel found towards the center of Altus Plateau, and so is the Celia Crystal Tunnel in Caelid. At this point, we could keep going to really track down smithing stone 6s, but like I mentioned before, plus 15 or plus 16 is more than enough to take down Morgott, and this is about going through the game as efficiently as possible and not really going out of our way. That being said, there are smithing stone 6s in the sealed tunnel next to this very friendly abductor virgin who just wants to give you the tightest, most warm hug you've ever had. You can also find one next to this equally friendly omen killer in Lane Dell. He's currently giving me all the birthday punches that he missed from last year. After Morgott, the third smithing stone bell bearing can be found immediately upon entering the mountaintop of the giants by going here in the Zamor ruins. It's guarded by the Zamor, but Torrent can zip right past them, which will unlock smithing stones 5 and 6 for purchase at Round Table Hold. At this point, getting a maxed out weapon is definitely possible if you do more exploring, but again, this run was about doing as minimal wandering and backtracking as possible. The most convenient smithing stone 7s can be found at a statue guarded by these friendly golems. You can also find smithing stone 7s at the First Church of America just north of the Freezing Lake. There are also a couple of smithing stone 7s in Dragonburrow on top of the skull near Grail. This should be enough to get your weapon to plus 20 for the fire giant. A plus 20 weapon with proper leveling should be enough to take down the Godskin Duo, which grants access to the only non-missable smithing stone bell bearing, which unlocks smithing stones 7 and 8 for purchase at the Round Table Hold. With the runes earned from defeating the duo, you would have enough to purchase any 7s or 8s that you need to get your weapon to plus 24. From there, backtrack to the foot of the Forged Site of Grace and climb on top of this skull surrounded by these birdies to secure an ancient dragon smithing stone to max out your weapon. It's not here, but at this point I had already grabbed it, and that's how you can quickly get your weapon to plus 25 with ease and with minimal exploration, since Elden Ring is a massive game and not all exploration is created equal, but these locations are definitely worthwhile. From this point on, I'll be showcasing both builds as they progress through the game from Morgott through Radagon, Mohg, and Malenia. I'll only mention things that change with the builds between each fight after this initial baseline. By Morgott, my Great Stars was plus 15 with Wild Strikes, and I was level 64 with 40 Vigor, 30 Endurance, 29 Strength, 12 Dexterity, and enough Faith and Arcane to cast Bloodflame Blade. The talismans I use here are Axe, Green Turtle, Claw, and Ritual Sword. My Physick had the Strength Knot and Spiked Tears.
Shall not be forgiven.
By Morgott, my Uchigatana was at plus 16 with Unsheath, and I was level 66 with 40 Vigor, 20 Endurance, 31 Dexterity, and enough Faith and Arcane to cast Bloodflame Blade. The talismans I use here are Axe, Green Turtle, Winged Sword Insignia, and Ritual Sword, and my Physick had the Dexterity Knot and Spiked Tears. By Fire Giant, my Great Stars was plus 20, and I was now level 69, with the only difference in stats and talismans being that I had 34 strength here. By Fire Giant, my Uchigatana was plus 20 with Stormblade, and I was level 71 with Mind increased to 13 and Dexterity increased to 34. I'm opening with this. I hate this fight. I know, real lukewarm take. So sleep pots are on me for both Godskin Duo fights. With my Great Stars build, I was at level 76 with endurance increased to 25, and my strength increased to 39. This fight generally went according to plan. This fight did not go according to plan towards the end. I switched my Ash of War to Spinning Slash. With the Uchigatana build, I was at level 78, with endurance increased to 21, and dexterity increased to 40. I took a detour to Castle Sol after the Godskins and upgraded the Great Stars to plus 25 and equipped Lion's Claw to it. I was level 80 and increased my strength to 40 and invested more into Faith, having it reach 15 for Flame grant me strength. In addition, I obtained a Shard of Alexander at this point and chose to keep Claw in over Axe due to jump attacks being more useful against Niall. Before Niall, I upgraded the Uchigatana to plus 25 and found Stormblade to be the best way to deal with his banished knights from a distance. I was now level 83, with 23 endurance. My dexterity is still at 40 because my physick buff was active, and the footage that I captured to show the build that I had against Niall was taken after the fight. My faith was at 15, but I completely blanked on using Flame grant me strength. Shard of Alexander was also obtained by this point. I'm gonna be honest, before Loretta I completely forgot to record my stats with the Great Stars build. But seeing as I was level 80 against Niall and level 96 against Maliketh, it's pretty safe to assume I was in my late 80s, early 90s here. Before Loretta, my Uchigatana build was level 90, with dexterity now at 47. I switched back to Unsheath in an attempt to break Loretta's stance consistently, and at this point, I had obtained the Thorny Cracked Tier and added it to my Physick to replace the Spiked Cracked Tier. After my vacation to Castle Sol and Erdtree, I returned to the main path to take on Maliketh. The Great Star's build was at level 96 here, with 26 endurance, 50 strength, and 20 faith for me to aim for 25 as soon as possible. Lion's Claw remains my Ash of War, to exploit Maliketh's low stance health, and to capitalize on that fervor, I used the Stone Barb Cracked Tier.
Thou who approacheth destined death will not have it stolen from me again. To kill what?
By Maliketh, my Uchigatana build was level 96 with Unsheath as my Ash of War, because I can't overstate this enough for people who struggle with Maliketh. Have you tried breaking his stance? I gained Rotten Wingsword insignia to really take this build to the next level. At any rate, my endurance is at 24, dexterity now truly at 50, and faith was at 17 to start attempting to get to 25 as soon as possible. I play by two rules when it comes to Gideon. Don't let him survive past the first attempt, and limit his magic spam as much as possible. By Gideon, the Great Stars build was level 102, and I switched to Wild Strikes to create a vortex of suffering for Gideon. To achieve this, I had 25 faith now to stack Golden Vow and Flame grant me strength together. I obtained the Lord of Blood's Exaltation, and my Physick Tears were the Thorny Cracked tier and the Green Burst tier. Other notable evolutions were that I now had 27 endurance to keep spamming Wild Strikes while he, melted.
I knew you'd come to stand before the Elden Ring, to become Elden Lord. What a sad state of affairs. Commend your spirit, but alas, none shall take the throne. Queen Maliketh has high hopes for us. I know in my bones a tarnished cannot become a lord. Not even you. A man cannot kill a god.
The Uchigatana is a bit harder to blitz Gideon down with, since katanas have weaker stagger than great hammers. Who would have thought it? But still possible. By Gideon, the Uchigatana build was level 102 and had Stormblade equipped. The main addition here is the Lord of Blood's Exaltation. Faith is unfortunately only 23 here, 2 levels too short for Golden Vow.
I knew you'd come to stand before the Elden Ring, to become Elden Lord. What a sad state of affairs. I commend your spirit, but alas, none shall take the throne. Queen Maliketh has high hopes for us, that we continue to struggle unto eternity. I know in my bones a tarnished cannot become a lord. Not even you. A man cannot kill a god.
By Hoarah Loux, the Great Stars build was now level 105, so I started investing into Mind to have enough FP to buff without needing to use a blue flask in the middle. Wild Strikes remains my Ash of War, and my Physick used the Spiked Cracked tier and the Thorny Cracked tier. There's also a weird visual glitch that happens towards the end of a fight when I had captured it, so apologies if that is still in the final version.
Thy strength befits a crown.
By Hoarah Loux, the Uchigatana build now reaches level 104, enough to use Golden Vow because my faith is at 25, which means I can stack it with Flame grant me strength. My Ash of War is double slash because Rob at Home is great for triggering successive hit buffs and status effects.
Thy strength befits a crown.
Now, this fight right here, this is exactly why when I use builds that have bleed mechanics, it's typically a strength or dex build that uses Blood Flame, so I can still have a strong attack rating against bosses that are immune to bleed, which I'm willing to bet at least one DLC boss will be immune to statuses. Because of Radabeast's immunity, I made Cragblade my Ash of War with Great Stars. My level was 109, and my talismans were Axe, Green Turtle, Claw, and Ritual Sword. Similar to the Great Stars build, bleed is a non-factor with the Uchigatana build against Radabeast. My Ash of War is double slash to ramp up successive hit buffs quickly, and my level was also 109. My talismans were Shard of Alexander, Green Turtle, Rotten Wing Sword Insignia, and Ritual Sword. I also brought a Buckler to parry Radagon, and Black Flame Blade to burn through Elden Beast's health pool. If you want to see the final steps for these builds, feel free to skip ahead to the level 150 sections of this video. For Great Stars build, defeated Radabeast in 6 hours and 55 minutes, whereas the Uchigatana build was slightly faster, beating Radabeast in 6 hours and 30 minutes. But there yet remains unfinished business. Mohg still needs to be defeated to enter Shadow of the Erdtree, and the ultimate build viability test yet remains in Malenia, Blade of Nicola. With my Great Stars build, I was level 116, running a setup I knew I could finish Mohg with in his first phase. Bloodflame Blade with Wild Strikes. Shard of Alexander buffing the power of Wild Strikes. Wild Strikes triggering Rotten Wingsword Signia, Thorny Cracked Tear, and Lord of Blood's Exaltation, and Ritual Sword Talisman, Golden Vow, and Flame Grant Me Strength. Destroy the Lord of Blood. Against Mohg, my Uchigatana build was level 115, and I brought the Purifying Crystal tier, in case I didn't have the DPS to stop Mohg's knee heal, but the mechanics for this build were there. Bloodflame Blade with Stormblade, Shard of Alexander buffing the power of Stormblade, Stormblade triggering Rotten Wingsword Insignia, Thorny Cracked Tear, and the Lord of Blood's Exaltation, with Stormblade being used at point blank. Ritual Sword Talisman, Golden Vow, and Flame Grant Me Strength. Do you want to see what happened? By Malenia, my Great Stars build was level 123, and my Ash of War was Stormcaller. My Talismans were Shard of Alexander, Axe, Lord of Blood's Exaltation, and Ritual Sword, with my Physick containing the Stone-Barbed Cracked Tear and Spiked Cracked Tear. At this point, Strength was at 60, and my Faith was at 33, granting me access to Howl of Chabriri to stack Golden Vow for the ultimate high-risk, high-reward buffing combo. My strategies were focused around stance breaking and bleed proccing Malenia into defeat.
extraordinary. The mark of a true lord.
For Malenia, my Uchigatana build was at level 123, with my Ash of War being Stormblade, for a good successive hit and ranged option. My Talismans were Shard of Alexander, Lore of Blood's Exaltation, Rotten Wing Sword Insignia, and Ritual Sword, with my Physick containing the Green Burst and Thorny Tears. My Dexterity was at 58, and my Faith was at 33 for Howl of Shabriri. I also have Buckler on me to parry Malenia. With Mohg defeated, the path to the DLC was clear, and Malenia acted as a fine source of runes. Both builds cleared Radabeast, Mohg and Malenia in under 8 hours, although they were both only leveled 128 after leveling post-Malenia, which was made possible only through the use of using nearly every boss remembrance as extra runes after defeating them, with exception to only the Elden Remembrance. I only used the remembrances this way, because I knew I had no intention of using any of the remembrances for weapons or spells that were earned from them. I wouldn't recommend using remembrances this way on a first playthrough. The Elden Remembrance was saved though, in order to forge the ultimate rune farming tool. If you already know about the Wave of Gold Mohgwyn rune farming method, which is far from a secret by now, you can skip to the end of the video to see what my builds look like at 150. At any rate, the logic of a Wave of Gold Mohgwyn rune farm starts by going to the Palace Approach Ledge Road, equipping Sacred Relic Sword, and using Wave of Gold to take out the Albinaurics, which generates a ton of runes, leading to very easy leveling through the oppression of the downtrodden. One issue that can occur for players is hearing about this method, trying it out, and Wave of Gold won't work because they don't meet the requirements for the Sacred Relic Sword. Neither of the builds I have meet those requirements, with Great Stars lacking enough dexterity and the Uchigatana build lacking enough strength. Any build that doesn't have enough strength to use the Sacred Relic Sword can be fixed just by two-handing it to meet the requirements. For a build that lacks enough dexterity or faith, you can use stat-boosting equipment like Talismans, Physick Tears, or Great Runes to satisfy the weapon's requirements. You also don't even need to fully upgrade the Sacred Relic Sword, you just need to upgrade enough to one-shot the Albinaurics for efficiency. After the noble sacrifice of the Albinaurics, both builds were complete. The Great Stars build has 50 Vigor because while I used 40 Vigor from Morgott through the endgame, I fully expect the DLC to hit hard, and it'd be unrealistic to think that I'm going to fight the DLC bosses perfectly. I don't view Vigor as health. It's a measurement of how many mistakes I'm allowed to make. Mine is at 16. Since I do need enough to get through my buff process, but I generally won't need much more than that because most of the weapon skills I use don't use that much FP. Endurance is at 30 because I'm a very aggressive player. Aggression requires being able to move, and having such high stamina allows me to move freely with little regard to stamina management, although I still need some awareness of it, as this build relies on charged heavy attacks and skills that can consume a lot of stamina like Lion's Claw and Wild Strikes. Strength is at 70 for weapon scaling, and Faith is at 33 for buffs, since while I could have gone with 80 strength, buffs generally make up the difference. When at base power and only the Ritual Sword Talisman, the Great Stars build has an attack rating of 747. When fully buffed, with Bloodflame Blade, Golden Vow, and Howl of Shabriri, it reaches an attack rating of 1,263 when two-handed. The Uchigatana build shares some similarities with my Great Stars build in terms of core stats. It has 50 Vigor, 30 Endurance, and a similar amount of Mind at 15. This build probably could have done better with 28 Endurance and 17 Mind. Since katanas don't consume that much stamina, this build definitely made more consistent use of weapon skills. Dexterity is at 70 for weapon scaling, and Faith is at 33 for buffs. When at base power and only the Ritual Sword Talisman, the Uchigatana build has an attack rating of 625. After buffing with Bloodflame Blade, Golden Vow, and Howl of Shabriri, it reaches an attack rating of 989 when two-handing. So we're at the end of the video, yeah? I've said all I need to say. You're still here. Okay, then I'll get something off my chest. There are likely plenty of Elden Ring players who saw my 40 Vigor throughout the run, and my 50 Vigor in the final versions of the builds, and probably thought to themselves, 60 Vigor is required! You only need less because you're good! This isn't realistic! Okay, let's talk numbers. 40 Vigor yields 1,450 HP. 50 Vigor yields 1,704 HP. And the coveted gold standard of 60 Vigor yields 1,900 HP. That 196 HP difference is maybe a single hit that will get me through a boss fight by the skin of my teeth in PvE. PvP is a different beast entirely, in which case I would completely be an advocate for 60 Vigor. But when it comes to PvE, instead of putting 10 more points into a measly 196 increase to Vigor, there are way more meaningful ways to protect my character. Black Flame's protection is a buff that increases physical damage negation by 30% at the cost of healing being 20% less effective for 70 seconds, and stacks with Golden Vow's negation. Dragon Crest Great Shield is a talisman that increases physical damage negation by 20%. And if physical damage negation still isn't enough, I can always get more Vigor by activating Morgott's Great Rune to get 2,130 HP when at 50 Vigor. And if that's still not good enough, I can always respec to 60 Vigor by sacrificing some points from Endurance, a damage stat, or Faith. So ultimately, Vigor is a stat that's all about player comfortability. If you're cool with 40, run 40. If you're cool with 50, run 50. If you feel you need the 60, with Morgott's Great Rune and as much damage negation as you need, go for it. It's all about how you want to play. So, this is farewell for now, with both of my builds awaiting at the seat of Mohgwyn Dynasty, with Miquella's Cocoon, awaiting the journey that awaits them in the Shadow of the Erdtree DLC. So what are your thoughts on these builds? What are you taking into the DLC? And there will be a follow-up video to this one, after a few weeks following the Shadow of the Erdtree DLC. I'll see you all in the Land of Shadow.